All right, thank you, Keith. So I am Scott Strenfeld, a PG&E meteorologist, and as I think we're all aware, a very strong Diablo windstorm unfolded overnight, continues today, and by most metrics we have evaluated, it appears like it is the strongest storm, offshore windstorm that we've seen since October 2017, and by some metrics stronger than October 17. We do have a rarer mono wind event. It appears to be arriving now in the southern Sierra, near the Madera and Fresno County border, near the communities of Auberry and Oakhurst. One of our weather stations in the community of North Fork was only gusting to 6 miles per hour as of 3:30 p.m., but as of 4 p.m. shot up to 40 miles per hour with RH plummeting into the teens. And I highlight this area because this is an area that experienced extensive tree mortality due to the recent bark beetle epidemic. So we've been keeping our eyes closely on that situation down there. We have seen some impressive wind gusts today. I'm sure you've all seen some of the values out there. In the North Bay, we saw multiple peak gusts recorded at or above 90 miles per hour. One of our readings from our PG&E weather station topped 100 miles per hour, and it did record sustained wind gusts 78 miles per hour. And we'll go out there and verify that station was reporting correctly. On the top of Mount St. Helena, we also had a couple weather stations. One of them, sustained winds were recorded to 72 miles per hour with this event, again coupled with very dry relative humidities. And just to put those wind speeds in perspective, a sustained wind of 74 miles per hour is considered hurricane force. Peak wind gusts down the Sacramento Valley, generally 50 to 60 miles per hour. Travis Air Force Base did gust to 64 miles per hour today. In the northern Sierra, we saw peak gusts in the 60 to 70 mile per hour range. Based on the wind speeds and reports of damage that we are already receiving in some of our urban locations and information that I've been receiving from multiple sources, we do anticipate our crews finding significant damage to our assets from vegetation and other sources once the patrol process commences. And to put in perspective with the event that we went through on October 9th and 11th, we found over 120 instances of damages and hazards in that event. And given the wind speeds that we saw in this event, much stronger, I expect our crews to find much more damage to our assets out there. So a team of PG&E meteorologists continue to not only monitor this event as it moves north to south, but a potential upcoming event, and I'll mention that. We will issue the all clear when conditions warrant so that field crews can get out there and do their important work of restoring energy to our customers. We have already issued the all clear for some of our areas in the far north portion of California, so crews have given the all clear in, for instance, locations around Redding and north of Redding and into the Humboldt, Trinity area. And we anticipate giving the all clear for all locations in Northern California sometime early tomorrow morning, dependent on real-time observations from our weather stations and observers that we've placed strategically out in the field. Unfortunately, as I alluded to, we are actively planning for another offshore wind event to impact Northern California Tuesday morning into Wednesday morning. Then our southernmost portion of our territory, Kern County, particularly the Tehachapi area, Tuesday night into Wednesday. and partner with our county, state, and federal forecast agencies on daily interagency coordination calls. And everyone is essentially aligned that we do have another period of high risk coming up for that event that I mentioned, Tuesday through Wednesday. So with all the bad news that I've been up here letting you know about for the past couple weeks, I do have a sliver of good news in that we're not eyeing another event beyond that event Wednesday. Weather models do not anticipate having a fourth event for us. So with that, I'll end there. Turn it back over to Keith.
Thank you. Mark?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Quinlan. I'm the incident commander for our PSPS event, the 1026 PSPS event. About 965,000 customers have been impacted at one time or another associated with this event. I'll get into the specifics of that. In addition, we've received roughly 100,000 as of the beginning of this conference. We have about 100,000 customers that are out of service based on emergent outages. Yesterday I signaled there's a large footprint that's associated with PSPS, that's the 965,000 portion, but we did experience or anticipate that there would be additional customers interrupted on the energized portions of our system due to the heavy winds that we were anticipating, and that has shown itself this afternoon. So our restoration efforts are on a couple of fronts. We're dispatching crews and our first responders out to these emergent outages as we normally would do in the winter or during regular day-to-day business for outages. And we are also starting our patrols and our restoration process on some of the areas of our service territory. Scott referenced them, namely in the North Valley, the Northern Sierra, and the North Coast. If you recall the zones, we split our system up into 6 zones. A 7th zone came in for that mono wind that Scott mentioned that's occurring right now. We were able to pull forward the all clear times for zones 1 and 5. That's about 18 fire index areas and represents about 8 of 38 counties that were impacted. So with the changing weather conditions, we go with the forecast, we monitor the actuals, timing shifts on occasion. It's been favorable for us so far. We weren't anticipating being able to start our patrols and restoration on a few of these zones until tomorrow, but they came in early. Wind conditions decreased in those areas, and it allowed us to start a little earlier. So that's very, very good news. At one point, we were actually patrolling and restoring areas in the northern area of our service territory, and at the same time de-energizing southern areas of the service territory because it's such a large 70,000 square mile service territory. So lots of operational complexity associated with that. But so far being done safely and without any disturbances or impacts to the overall interconnection in the state of California or the larger West footprint. The good news is that all clears for all of the remaining zones will occur sometime tomorrow morning between 0600 and 0800. There was a small area in Kern County that we're still monitoring. We feel that that's going to drop out of scope because wind conditions are not coming in as originally forecasted, so that's good news for the folks down to the south. To Scott's point, the next event is October 29th, and that begins between 0800 and 0900 in the morning, and it ends roughly October 30th at 10 o'clock. So similar to this event, the footprint is similar. Customer counts are a little bit different, a little less impact than what we've experienced so far with this event. But the timing will be similar, where we'll have areas of the state that come into play where we need to de-energize earlier than some other areas. So we're working with the meteorology team and running all of our advanced analytics and looking at our forecast models to make good informed decisions. Because as referenced yesterday, we do not want to interrupt any customers any earlier than we need to. We want to do this as close to the high-risk period as possible because we understand how inconvenient and burdensome power interruptions are to the general public. We're included in that, so we completely understand. In terms of our field resource team that has started the patrol and restoration sequence, 6,000 field employees, roughly, a bit north of that. We have 44 helicopters that we're using to do air patrols. We're also continued to leverage that night flight capability that's been furnished to us through Cal OES on the fixed-wing aircraft that has the ability to see some of our conductors at night via a high-res camera and some infrared technology. So that's saving some time for us to do patrols at night, number one, and then it allows us to redeploy the helicopter assets to the distribution system the following morning. We have made a request for mutual assistance to our partners in the industry. That consists of 130 employees that have already arrived on the PG&E system and are working. They are patrol resources, qualified electrical workers to help us do these patrols. We have 110 additional employees that have committed and will be on the system tomorrow for their safety briefing and onboarding. We've also made a request for 150 additional four-person heavy construction crews to help us out with any type of repairs that we need to address as a result of the high winds. And we've been working with some contracting partners to secure an additional 40 helicopters that would be incremental to the 44 that we already have, and that would really expand our air attack on this and enable us to restore quicker than usual. We remain by the side of CAL FIRE on the Kincaid fire footprint. We understand it's still a volatile situation, especially with the high winds and the impacts to the fire, but our team is there working under their direction, and we are doing everything that we can to support those first responders. Finally, in regards to CRCs, we have 60 community resource centers that are open. Referenced yesterday that the hours of these are between 8 in the morning to 8 in the evening. And there's a number of different amenities that are provided for our customers to recharge phones, get water, hot drinks, dry food, Wi-Fi access, and things like that to provide a little comfort during these times. So with that, that concludes my operational briefing, and I'll turn it over to Andy Beasley.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everyone. I'm Andy Beasley. I am the President and CEO of the Pacific Gas and Electric Utility. That means I have oversight for all of our utility operations. Let me start with the gratitude for the first responders fighting the Kincaid fire. It is a volatile situation. I spent my day touring around Sonoma County. I actually visited with our incident command at Rohnert Park that is supporting CAL FIRE in meeting the challenges presented by the Kincaid fire. We're working closely. We are working at their direction. And I will tell you that what I saw today left me very satisfied with the work that PG&E people are doing in support of the first responders on the Kincaid fire. I think what's important to note is that this is about all of us. I keep saying that, but this is about a sense of community, about neighbors, about our friends. When you think about the PG&E workforce, those are people who live in your communities. They are your friends. They are your neighbors. They are part of this. They feel it personally, and they take personal responsibility to ensure that they are doing everything they can to make sure that you remain safe as well. But there are obligations on all of us. I also had the opportunity today to visit our CRCs up in Marin and Sonoma County. I would recommend that if you need your phones charged, if you need to find relief or comfort, and if you are impacted by the PSPS, please seek out those centers. Their locations are listed on our website, pg.com, pg.com. Okay. And the reason I say that is because, as you heard in the weather, we're coming up to another event which might be on the heels of this one, very close, with its emergence during the morning hours of Tuesday. As we said before, and we continue to stand to, it is our objective to restore every customer that's impacted by a PSPS as quickly as we can, as safely as we can. And we always want to do that before they experience another event. This one's going to be tight. We have over 600,000 accounts that we'll have to notify if they're going to be within scope. And you know that we do notify 48 hours out, 24 hours out, 4 hours out, right up to the event. And while that could change, there is a concern that we may have customers who are impacted by this event who may not have normal communications available to them. They may not have the radio, they may not have the television, they may have let their devices lose charge in expectation that they soon would have their power back. What I urge is I urge all of you to ensure you are prepared for the fact that your power may not come back. And saying that, please make sure your devices are charged. If you can't do that in a place that has power, at a friends or relatives or at a community that still has lights, please go to the CRCs and charge your devices. It's imperative that we're able to communicate with you during these type of events, and we ask that you do that because preparedness is everything. We all have to be prepared for these events, and your ability to manage through these events without great trauma is based on preparedness. And we will do what we can to assist, and we ask that you do things that you need to do to make sure that you're capable of managing without power should not come back on. Now, when I was at the CRCs, I did talk to customers, and you're right, what we do is not popular. I will not tell you that people congratulated us. People were angry, but I talked to them not to hear from them how good a job we were doing, but I talked with them to find out what more we can do. What are the issues that they're facing, how we can help. And we had those conversations. And I came back with ideas, and we will start to implement some of those. And I'm not going to talk about what they are per se, because I want to make sure that we get them out and done. But this network of CRCs is a valuable thing, and I hope you take advantage of them. One of the questions that came up was always the question of the scale and scope. Do we have to do it so broadly? Why do certain communities have lights and others don't? And we try to explain that, as we've said here before, we bring engineering and analytics to this question. We look at years and years of meteorological data, years and years of outage data. And in doing that, we look for the highest risk zones where we have the potential for catastrophic wildfire. And as we've said, the thing we try to prevent is debris contacting our lines in high wind zones where there is dry and plentiful fuel, and the probability of fire spread is significant. So when you think about 30,000 miles of conductor, which is more than can wrap around the earth, the question is, that's what's in scope. To do anything less would basically be rolling dice around public safety, and we will not roll the dice when it comes to public safety. So that's why it happens. That's why it's that significant and broad as it is. When you hear about the wind data that we have in 100-mile-an-hour gusts and sustained winds in the 55 to 60-mile-an-hour zone, we believe that these decisions continue to be right, but the obligation on us in doing these preemptive shutoffs is to ensure that we understand the hardship our customers face and do our best to ease that burden. So we've started notifying customers for the next shutoff. And again, I would hope that everybody does prepare. We continue to work with relevant agencies because we cannot provide everything ourselves. I also visited one of the Red Cross shelters, which was nearby one of our CRCs. And I can understand the challenge and magnitude of dealing with individuals that have to be evacuated from their homes. We don't take this lightly. We take it personally, and we will do what we can. The last thing I will say is that, once again, we've had instances where our Field workers have been accosted and threatened. And we would just ask that while we know, and I personally know, that there is a lot of anger out there, please do not direct that to our men and women, our employees, our contracted people who are there for only one reason, to keep you safe, but to ensure that they can restore your energy and power as quickly as possible. So with that, we'll open it up to questions.
All right, so questions in the room. David, do you want to start? Do you have any questions? Oh.
Betty Yu, KPIX. Can you speak specifically to what the Bay Area could expect in terms of impact during this next round that begins on Tuesday?
Sure. Mark, I'll give that to you.
Thanks for the question, Betty. Right now, the event is still under scope. I will say that from a geographical perspective, in terms of areas of the service territory that are impacted, it's very, very similar footprint, a little bit reduced. So the Bay Area footprint from a North Bay perspective will be nearly identical. When we start getting into the East Bay and South Bay, smaller scope.
And then regarding the current shutoff, do you know how many customers were affected that were not included in the original PSPS that may have lost power or experienced down lines or damage or anything of that nature?
And by original PSPS, can you clarify on that?
As in they did not get an alert that they may lose their power, but since yesterday they may have lost their power.
I need to ask a follow-up question so that I get this right for you. So are you referencing the people that were energized and experienced an emergent interruption because of regular wind activity that weren't part of PSPS?
Yes.
I could tell you that right before this conference, we were at about 100,000 customers that were currently out of service because of that cause, emergent. I would anticipate, though, that throughout the day that number is larger. Over 100,000. And they wouldn't be normally notified that, they're going to be interrupted because they weren't part of the scope for PSPS. So there's a difference between proactively shutting off the power and then areas of the service territory that don't have that fuel risk or the mountainous terrain, but are still exposed to the winds, which we anticipated would have some outage activity. We would not have proactively notified them. Our notifications are kind of focused on the planned interruption piece, not the unplanned. I hope that answers.
So much like a winter storm, someone would not get a notification that their power is going to go off because we don't know where there's going to be damage on the system. PSPS, we do have to evaluate that. As Mark noted, 940,000, and then we escalated a little bit yesterday afternoon with the folks down south in Madera and Fresno County. So those are the ones that did receive notifications.
Hello, Luz Peña with ABC7 News. You mentioned that you notified some customers about the potential of Tuesday shutoffs. Can you maybe specify how many were notified? And also, you also mentioned that some people are, they don't have power right now. Is there a chance that some of those customers that still don't have power at this point are not going to have power maybe until Wednesday, Thursday because of this new round?
So thanks for the question. I'll answer the last one first. And this is consistent with Andy's remarks. There is a potential that there may be people that are currently interrupted as a result of this PSPS event that we do not get to restore before the weather becomes unsafe again, and they remain out of service and are out until we get the final all clear. We're in the process of determining where and who, because we understand how important that is to customers. We understand that they need to make plans. And we want to be transparent as we can. We'll know by tomorrow morning. In regards to the customers, the first part of your question, that were notified of this upcoming event on the 29th, we made our T-minus 48, our 48-hour advance notification today, and we'll make a 24-hour notification tomorrow, and then the imminent 4-hour notification right before we turn off. So we notified just over 500,000 customers today of a potential for a PSPS. That number will change before the 24-hour notification goes out. And there's two ways that changes. The first element is weather. Weather conditions change. Obviously, the footprint changes of the assets that could be impacted. That's one aspect. The other aspect is the transmission component. So we have a transmission system and a distribution system. Distribution configuration and customer impacts is rather easy to determine. Transmission is a little more difficult to determine because it involves performing power flow analysis, and it involves us working closely with the California ISO to simulate the removal of that equipment to see what the impacts are on the greater interconnection. So it's not an easy proposition such as distribution. So we're working on that, and when we get that additional impact, we'll add that to the 500, and then we'll make that T-minus 24. All in the same general areas that we've had today. It's really just a matter of expansion of the geography. So same zones.
Also, that the weather all clear that we're getting by essentially daybreak tomorrow is ahead of what we thought, so that'll help us out.
Yeah, so you kind of said it right there, Keith. So we were anticipating most of the all clears to take place tomorrow sporadically throughout the day. Really weren't anticipating many of those zones coming available to us to start our process until tomorrow, and luckily we were able to start on 2 of those today, so think of it as a head start. But all of the remaining areas that are impacted right now will have all clears issued in the morning between 06 and 08, which is good news for us because that coincides with about the start of daybreak, and that means that we'll have a full 12, 13-hour period to facilitate, conduct air patrols, and we anticipate restoring a lot of people tomorrow.
David?
David Baker with Bloomberg. A couple of numbers questions. Do you actually have anybody restored yet in this event since you've had the all clear up north?
We do. The numbers change. Once we get into full swing of things, we restore anywhere between 10 and 20,000 an hour on average. Once we're at full force, all the aircraft in the air, everybody moving. So we had some small incremental restoration activity right before this press conference. I expect we'll probably have 20 to 50,000 customers restored while we're here. We were right in the middle of a move of returning a transmission line to a substation that would restore about 20,000 customers. So I'm very optimistic that we'll put a dent in those numbers tonight. And we'll work all the way up to points where it's safe to do so. We'll work into the evening. At some point, we'll have to stand down, and then we'll pick it back up in the morning.
And just to clarify on the numbers that you were talking about earlier, between the public safety shutoff that we had, it's roughly 960,000?
960 approximate.
That and the unexpected outages that just come with the storm, 100,000, you ended up with more than 1 million electric
That's right.
customers that lost power?
That's correct.
Wow.
We'll know exactly how much after the event is completed. Every outage that we have, either planned or unplanned, we document. We do an interruption report, state cause, and file that in our records. So we measure our performance on that. So we'll have all of that data available post-event. So it will definitely be north of 1 million.
One last question, I'll let someone ask one. Are you aware of any incidents today? We had so many fire starts today. Are you aware of any that might have been tied to some of your power lines? I saw on KPIX they were saying there might have been a downed line next to the Lafayette Tennis Club when that went up.
I didn't hear about that fire. A lot of attention to the fire that broke out near the bridge, the Carquinez Bridge. That caused 2 of our lines to operate from the smoke, and that put our system in a little bit of a degraded state as it relates to reliability. So our intent there was to allow the fire to pass through under the lines, and when it was safe to do so, confirm there were no temporary flight restrictions with CAL FIRE, and then get a ship in the air after the winds died down a little bit. And we patrolled that line, and as the start of this conference, we had about 50% of the line patrolled. We had the line patrolled in the area of the fire, and it patrolled good. We were running it all the way back to its source, closer to Moraga just to confirm that there wasn't anything, no interaction or interference with that section of it. And if not, we're going to re-energize that and put that portion of the system normal. That was the only impact. No damage, just operational activity due to the smoke.
No indication that your line actually started that fire?
Negative.
Over here.
Joaquin Palomino with the San Francisco Chronicle. Just to follow up on David Baker's question, any other incidents that you know of besides the Vallejo one? As reports of Milpitas, also the Lafayette as well, a fire in Lafayette that might have been related to, or at least anecdotal reports that there were, down lines in the area.
Yeah, I don't have that information, but we have our Wildfire Safety Operations Center. We have that up. That's a 24/7 facility that monitors fire activity, both emergent and planned controlled burns, and they were very active today tracking fires. Our primary intent there when we are notified of a fire is what we need to do to support the fire suppression efforts with either the local agency or CAL FIRE, depending on the size and scope of the event. We don't really focus on causation of ignition or anything like that, and we always cooperate with the agency who has control of the scene. So there also is a Wildfire Safety Operations Center analyst that is full-time in our Emergency Operations Center as part of my staff as the IC of the event, so that they're right there and they've got direct access to all of those systems that we use to monitor fire activity.
Loose, anybody else? Or David, you got to follow up, we'll go loose after that.
Yeah, just sort of an overall question. I mean, the last big PS we had here, there was a lot of criticism about how it was carried out and things that didn't work well in terms of the website, call centers, and things like that. Operationally, how do you feel this one is going in comparison?
Well, maybe I should answer that. I think the execution on this one was improved. All right? I think the major elements that we dealt with, which needed significant improvement, as we got a lot of advice and criticism, was really around coordination with the counties, coordination with tribal governments, tighter coordination with all state agencies, and better communications with our customers. And that's where we've been focusing. In the core of our operations, when you talk about the planning, the scoping, the reconfiguring, the de-energization, the re-energization, I think that, and I say this without a sense of pride in my own organization, was performed as well as they could be performed. When you think about the last major PSPS, and credit to Mark and his team and all the hardworking men and women in the field, when we had 780,000 more or less accounts that were de-energized, the speed at which we brought those back was quite remarkable, and I would say would be unmatched in the industry. Now, granted, we weren't dealing in a storm situation. This was a planned event, and therefore you would expect it to move more smoothly. But I will say, given the magnitude and scale of our technical operations that were safely performed, because this is dangerous work, was I think, set a new standard. But where we definitely needed to improve, and we made significant improvement, and we're not yet done making improvements, is in the coordination with everyone else who's part of this. And recognizing that, it's not only the counties, it's not only the other relief agencies, it's not only the tribal governments, it literally is the customers that have to be involved. And the danger with a business like ours is that we are very good operationally, and we tend to have an operational focus. Historically, there's never been such a thing as a massive planned outage of this scale. And so it's not surprising that there's some things that we just haven't gotten down to the same level as our operations. But they're significantly improved, which was what your question was. And we will continue to seek feedback when this event is done to improve it even further.
Mark, just to clarify or to add to that, for our outage on the October 9th event, 738,000 or a little bit more, what was our total turnaround time? About 48?
It was roughly 48 hours, but I'll put it in a little context. That's, I've made comments today and in previous conferences about our ability to perform aerial patrols. That is the most efficient way that we can patrol our infrastructure from both transmission and distribution perspectives. But our challenge there is we can't do those patrols at night via helicopters for safety reasons, because you have to fly low in the wired environment to get your eyes on the asset. So that really, of a 24-hour day, that means that 12 hours of daylight is really your opportunity, right? And so if you think about 48 hours, that's really 24 hours of restoration opportunity. And we were able to restore, that very large-scale event in 24 hours of opportunity. What I'll say about this event's a little larger, so that's an element that we need to consider. In addition, the winds were stronger and they were for a longer duration, so we anticipate finding additional damage out there than the October 9th event, an event in which we found nearly, north of 120 damage cases. So confident that we're going to find just as much or more than that associated with this event. So that could delay restoration for some customers if repairs are needed in significant damage areas.
After this, thank you. After this next round of PSPS starting Tuesday, when do you foresee that those 965,000 customers will have their power back?
The all clear, I believe, is Wednesday around 10 in the morning. And so I would estimate preliminarily 48 hours from there, notwithstanding any damage we find.
And the 965 right now, we will start restoring tomorrow, so that number is going to go down for starters, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So the 965 that were impacted at one time, keep in mind some of those customers have already been restored, may be re-interrupted. So it's hard to, you look at it at a point in time and the numbers change. Additional customers are interrupted, some have been restored, right? So we anticipate getting a lot of customers restored, to my earlier comment, tomorrow, because we're going to have that full day. We're going to get as much as we can get done tomorrow safely, and then we're going to ride through that next period of weather where we're going to be de-energized due to safety risks. And then after that, to Scott's point, we don't forecast another event. We've had rolling events, right? Rolling events over and over and over again. As soon as we clean one up, we're prepping for the next. And after this one, we kind of get back to normal, at least for a week, to where we don't have any other events. So I'm anticipating we'll be about 48 hours from that all clear.
How do you feel? Fourth time PG&E turned off electricity in just 1 month. And you were mentioning yesterday we have equipment 40 to 60 years old. I mean, it's 1 month, 4 shutoffs. That's a lot. When was the last time this happened?
Well, it's never happened before because the program has only been in place at PG&E since 2018. And in 2018, we executed PSPS one time in October on the 14th. And, this year we're seeing more instances of weather that calls for it. So I'll just say that I don't recall winds like this, like we've had this week and even earlier into the week last year. I don't recall them since 2017 when we didn't have a public safety shutoff plan. But Scott mentioned that these winds were strong, some of the strongest that we've seen in recent history here.
Scott, do we have any context for kind of 3 events like this?
Yeah, so we have a 30-year... Sure, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was hiding. So we do have a 30-year weather high-resolution climatology that we've been able to analyze to determine when these offshore wind events occur before the first rains. We also have simulated fuel moistures over that entire 30-year period, and so combining the weather and fuels element, we're able to basically run back in time and look at how many events we would see year over year to kind of answer that question. And what pops out is that weather is extremely variable year to year, just like how much rain we get is variable year to year. So there's some years in our historical record where we would have 0 public safety power shutoffs. Like 2016 was a remarkably calm year, if memory serves, from that historical analysis. But then there's some years where, like this one, it's a little bit of an outlier and above the normal amount of public safety power shutoffs that we would usually experience on a typical average, but it all comes and arrives with the weather, and unfortunately we got these offshore wind events before the first big rains of the season, and that's just how the cookie crumbled in this case.
Andy, can you address the customers who are upset, they're frustrated? The governor has been very critical of the utility. They're all saying this cannot be the new normal. PG&E needs better solutions. We need better infrastructure. Going forward, this can't be it.
Well, there's a lot of conversations to have, and we will be engaging on all those fronts when we're past the events right in front of us. Number one priority for us is to ensure that we're doing everything we can to prevent catastrophic wildfires. Past that, and I've said before, we are already starting to plan to ensure that PSPS becomes the absolute last resort or not necessary. And what that means, if we believe that we have seen a fundamental change in the environment in which we're going to operate, it requires us to rethink how we provide this essential service. So the programming that we've been talking about, and it's just the beginning, is the continuation of the hardening of the system, which talks about different type of equipment. It talks about undergrounding. There's a lot of that work already going on. It's our enhanced vegetation management to ensure that we're minimizing the opportunity for debris to fly into the right-of-way under standard clearances to prevent that. It's also increasing our ability to reconfigure the system so that we impact fewer and fewer customers, and that's this issue of adding sectionalization or switches so that we can change the way energy flows. Along with that, it does then require a different strategy in terms of distributed generation, because what enhances our ability to reconfigure the system is providing new sources of energy that we can use on a temporary basis to supply areas as opposed to shut them down. And then the last is this question of microgrids. Can we have resilient zones so that we change literally the way we think about the provision of energy over the long haul? The execution of all these things will make it less necessary to have broad, big PSPS. We do believe that this will take time, that PSPS must remain a viable option, and what will allow it to be a viable option is our ability to execute it seamlessly in cooperation with state agencies and tribal governments and counties and our customers to make sure that when we have to do it, we can do it with the minimal disruption and hardship it's going to cause, and that's really where we're going.
A technical question.
Sure.
People who are affected by this current shutoff, is there a chance that their power is not restored in time for the next shutoff on Tuesday, that they will not have had power since Saturday?
Yeah. It depends on a number of factors, but I will say, and what I want to say very clearly is, let's say that yes, there is that possibility that even as well as we can execute the restoration, and you heard Mark talk about that, and it will depend on the damages that we find associated purely with the windstorm. We want people to think, every customer to think, what happens if they do not get restored? Can they go for another day and a half or 2 days and take all those precautions? It's important that we don't become complacent, that we don't set goals that can lead somebody not to take care of what they need to take care of. So I would ask everybody who is listening or watching this to make sure you're prepared for the potential that your power may not be restored. That's not what we want to do, and we will work very hard to get everybody back. But as soon as you have your energy back, or if you don't get it, please make sure your devices are charged, that we can communicate with you and prepare for your own safety. That's very important. So I'd like to talk about it that way. Tomorrow we'll be able to talk in more defined terms as who will be impacted. What's very important for us at these 5:30 conferences is to get as much information out to our customers that we can so they can plan and prepare for these events.
Okay, I think that takes care of everybody. I want to thank our sign language interpreters for being here again today. Very helpful. I appreciate them helping us get out important safety information and preparedness information to all customers. So with that, we're done. We'll be back tomorrow at 5:30.